This is a 1989 Nissan Skyline GTR. This is the car that gets to its red line really quickly and just delivers its power in a way that is absolutely unmistakable. If you love classic cars, then Donald loves you. And now, a date with a legendary monster, Godzilla. This is a 1989 Nissan Skyline GTR, nicknamed Godzilla. And for a good reason, because Godzilla was an all-conquering monster created from a radioactive accident that revived it. And while certainly not radioactive, this Nissan R32 Skyline crushed all that came before it. It was absolutely dominant in Japanese Group A racing, winning the championship 4 years in a row and winning championships in Australia and New Zealand as well. This car became a legend long before anyone outside of Japan, Australia, New Zealand, and a lucky few in the UK had ever actually driven one. And that success was only heightened by, of course, its presence in all of the legendary online games. And of course, once these cars could be imported to the US in the great series of movies. Now, it's worth noting that JDM cars, Japanese domestic market cars, also have the appeal of the unattainable. If you tell me you can't have something, then you want it even more. And that's certainly the case with these high-performance cars that were built solely for the Japanese domestic market. Now, it's an interesting thing, I've spent just a little bit of time in Japan, a fascinating and wonderful place, and of course the Japanese are absolutely car crazy and have, in their very short car building history, built some really remarkable and very memorable cars. But it's quite curious that they're absolutely mad about racing because they're incredibly disciplined on the street. There are very strict speed limits in Japan, and all the drivers adhere to them exactly, much like you find in Germany or Switzerland. And also, there are great regulations, of course. Japan is a very small country, and in order to buy a car, you have to have a place to park the car off the road, which also has led to the development of a lot of very small cars, because obviously it's easier to find a place to store a small car than a big one. The car I'm driving right now, this 1989 Nissan Skyline GTR, is, by Japanese standards of the time, a fairly large car. For us Americans, it's a car, roughly the size of a Mustang or a Camaro, slightly smaller, designed to go racing in their equivalent of NASCAR/Trans Am. Factory production cars, but like the European FIA series, of special performance but homologated through production models available to the public. And that's what this car is. A limited production model just made to legalize the performance for the racing versions. And this car also was a great pioneer for Nissan in terms of technology. There's always a lot of talk about technology pass-through from racing to the street, and occasionally it happens. In this case, it was a time when there was a great deal of advanced technology going on in car development, and especially in Japan. And this car has all-wheel drive and four-wheel steering, which of course is tremendous advantage for a competition car, and also a great advantage for a road car, because it gives you the kind of road holding that is difficult to achieve without very, very, very sophisticated tires and suspension and steering in a normal rear-wheel drive, or certainly a front-wheel drive car. You can never get this kind of feel. And it also allows for a certain lightness. This car feels absolutely rock solid and smooth and very well built, but it also has a certain lightness on its feet that is very sort of, I don't know, Alfa Romeo-like. It feels thoroughly Japanese in its own way as well, because there's sort of a no-nonsense aspect of every Japanese car, even the most characterful ones, that really shows its natural characteristics quite on the surface. Of course, one of the things about enjoying a car like this is the fact that since they were only made for the Japanese market and those few export markets which are also right-hand drive, it was never built in a left-hand drive version. So to enjoy the great pleasures of the car, you have to be comfortable driving a right-hand drive car. It's easy to get used to. I've owned a number of right-hand drive cars, and of course the trickiest bit, well, there are two tricky bits. One is, of course, shifting with your left hand, which you get used to after a while. Just remember which direction the shift pattern goes in so that you don't end up going into fifth when you want to go to first. But the other thing is the stalk controls. I found the first time I drove a car with right-hand drive, I was on vacation in South Africa. Every time I went to make a turn, I inadvertently turned on the windshield wipers. It was horribly embarrassing, but I got over it. The other thing is, when you're driving through the countryside in a right-hand drive car, it's not a very big deal, especially if you're in a right-hand drive country like the UK or Ireland or South Africa. It's when you get to a roundabout or to a corner that you first notice that you have to make a choice. In the cities, it's easy. Everyone's driving on the same side, but I digress. It is a car that has a reputation which is very, very, very well earned. It's not one of those cases of the hype not living up to the reality, because this is a car that really delivers. And it's also quite interesting, in our little series here on the Audrain YouTube channel, I've been driving the Mazda RX-7 twin turbo, the Toyota Supra twin turbo, and now this Skyline. And with all respect to those other two cars, which are wonderful cars, I have to say this is the most grown up of the cars. This is the car that gets to its red line really quickly and just delivers its power in a way that is absolutely unmistakable. You can feel the development that went into this car to make it such a capable competition car, but it's also a very capable, smooth riding GT car. Of our trio, the Toyota Supra, the RX-7, and this Skyline, I'd have to say that on balance, the Skyline gives us more of what we're looking for. It has all the performance of those other two cars in a package that is absolutely smooth and quiet, like the most refined GT car you could find. It doesn't certainly have the rawness of the sports car that you get certainly from the RX-7, or that eagerness that you get from the Supra twin turbo. But this is a car that's so incredibly well balanced. It does everything and does it quite well. If you can find one that hasn't been too modified away from its essential nature, and if you can also become comfortable with driving on the right side of the car, this could be a car that could be amazingly rewarding. Of course, all the examples that you're going to find are going to come from Japan. It's really important to make sure that you can translate whatever service records that you can find. They often don't come with much service records, and always plan to have it thoroughly serviced before you use its prodigious performance. But it's a car that rewards in an amazing way. The modern Nissan products are terrific and very capable cars, but somehow this one has a spirit that I think some of the moderns lack. This truly is a monster of a car.